Credited with revolutionizing not one, not two, but 6 different industries: personal computers, animated movies, music, phones, tablet computing, and digital publishing, Steve Jobs played a huge part in creating the modern world we know and love today. Hi there, my name is Dan Wallace. Welcome to Unleash the Ultramind, where we help you unlock the hidden powers of your brain. Today's subject, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was an odd duck even from a young age. He was incredibly smart, with some teachers recommending he skip multiple grades. However, his social life was much more challenging. During elementary school, he found himself becoming an outcast, ostracized and ridiculed by his classmates. By 6th grade, he delivered his parents an ultimatum that either they moved to a new school district or he would stop going to school. Amazingly enough, and as a credit to Steve's future skills as a persuader, his parents decided to pull every cent they had out of savings and move to a new house in the Cupertino School District. Jobs displayed an interest in electronics, and the Cupertino area was full of engineering-minded families that were busy founding what we now know as Silicon Valley. It was a mecca for young Steve, and the connections he made here as a youth would go on to shape him into the mogul we all know. As a young man, he knew he wanted to get into the computing world, but although he had interest in the subject, he was not particularly skilled at electrical or computer engineering. So, he became friends with Steve Wozniak, a computer nerd of the highest order. The two bonded over a mutual love for Bob Dylan music, computer technology, and an interest in playing pranks on friends. Jobs and Woz had fun with various hacking and computer-related misadventures throughout Steve's high school years, before Steve went off to Reed College. Jobs didn't do very well in college academic life, having a hard time committing to a major or to making it to all his classes on time. He considered dropping out, despite the fact that his parents were spending all of their savings on keeping him there. In the end, he compromised, attending classes by auditing them in individual sit-in sessions rather than committing to a full schedule. It was while attending college that Steve was introduced to Eastern mysticism, along with vegetarianism, Zen Buddhism, and the idea of enlightenment. After his time at Reed, Steve worked for Atari for a period of time, saving up money for an eventual trip to India to find a guru. Steve spent 7 months in India and returned a changed man. His own mother didn't recognize him at the airport until he spoke to her. Zen Buddhism and Eastern mysticism would continue to be a strong influence on Steve for the rest of his life. Upon returning to the US, Steve returned to his old job at Atari, but he also rekindled his friendship with Steve Wozniak. Woz had invented a personal computer, the Apple I, and Jobs thought they should try and sell it. So, they founded Apple Computer in Jobs' garage and set to work building their first marketable computer model, the Apple II. Jobs designed the case, Woz designed the internals of the computer and the operating system, and their friend Rod Holt designed its power supply. The Apple II was Apple Computer's first big hit, and also one of the first successful mass-produced home computers ever made. At work, Jobs was sometimes known to be cruel, manipulative, and prone to angry outbursts. He was the ultimate perfectionist and expected perfection from everyone who worked with him. Additionally, he was very controlling, expecting everyone to follow his word as law. Some would even call this his reality distortion effect, where he would propose something that was effectively impossible with the time and budget they were given, but everyone went along with it anyway because it was Steve, and his incredible persuasive personality drove them to it. Regardless of his personality quirks, we can say he was certainly successful. At age 23, Steve was worth $1 million. At age 24, he was worth $10 million. At age 25, he was worth over $100 million. It was not all sunshine and roses for Apple, however. Declining sales of the Apple II and lack of a natural successor to the computer loomed. By 1985, Apple was in real trouble. Cheap IBM computers running Microsoft were hurting sales, and their latest computer, the Macintosh, was selling poorly due to a very high price. Woz left the company, and Jobs was on the hot seat for his mismanagement of the Macintosh division. When he caught wind of plans to effectively remove any influence he had at the company by relegating him to head of new product development, Jobs resigned, taking a decent portion of senior management and leadership with him. The group in exile would go on to form Next Computer. Next Computer developed workstations intended for academia. However, even though they were technologically advanced, the $9,999 price tag kept the workstations from selling very well. While their next model did a bit better, it still sold poorly, partially due to Jobs' obsession with an eccentric and expensive case design that drove up the price. Eventually, Next got out of the hardware business and transitioned to developing software only. While all of this was going on, Jobs took an interest in the Graphics Group, which would go on to be renamed Pixar after it spun out of Lucasfilm's computer graphics division. He helped fund the initial company and was with them through their first successful run with Disney, being credited as the executive producer in Toy Story. During the bad days at Next, Steve buried himself in the goings-on at Pixar. Unlike his extremely controlling, hands-on, demanding style of management at his computer companies, Jobs kept a more hands-off approach at Pixar, being content to allow the animators and storytellers to do their own thing. This spoke to his strong belief and trust in the vision held by those at Pixar, particularly creative lead John Lasseter. In 1996, Apple was in trouble again and needed serious revitalization of their software division. To solve this, they bought Next for $427 million. With it came a more mature, measured, and experienced Steve Jobs. Within a year, Steve was interim CEO. In 1998, they released the stylish iMac, the first commercially successful computer Apple had in almost a decade. In 2001, the revolutionary iPod was released, along with the revolutionary music service iTunes. Apple Computer, iPod, and the peripheral sales continued to grow until, in 2006, Apple became the most valuable company in the world. In 2007, the iPhone was released, driving sales even higher, followed soon by the iPad. All was not right in Steve's world, however. In 2003, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Rather than go the route of traditional medicine, he decided to pursue alternative treatment options, including treatment through diet, acupuncture, and herbal remedies. Finally, after 9 months, he relented and decided to follow through with his doctor's recommendations. By this point, however, quite a bit of damage had been done. Steve's health would continue to deteriorate in the coming years, even as Apple's fortune soared. By 2011, he had undergone a full liver replacement, several surgeries, and multiple rounds of chemo and radiation therapy. On August 24, 2011, Jobs sent an email out to Apple as a whole, announcing his resignation and appointment of Tim Cook as his successor. Jobs stayed on and would continue to work at the company until the day before he passed away, 6 weeks later. Throughout his life, Steve was always known as a controversial, cantankerous, and occasionally cruel individual. He was also, however, incredibly creative, brilliant, and inventive. An enigma to almost everyone around him, he was difficult to understand, but the results of his genius are undeniable. His penchant for persuasion, eye for design, and ruthless negotiation tactics are legendary, and he truly changed the face of the computer industry forever. So, how do we begin to go about emulating this man's talents and success? Obviously, that's a pretty tall order, but here's a few places to start. 1. Expand your horizons. Steve was the archetypal counterculture figure. He strove to zig when everyone else zagged. He even named taking LSD as one of the 3 most important events in his life. Now, I'm not one to advocate drug use. However, it cannot be denied that living outside of cultural norms was part of what made Steve Jobs the visionary he was. In your daily life, try to think outside the box, see beyond what others are seeing, and march to the beat of your own drummer. Don't be afraid to be different, especially if you have a good reason to do so. 2. Strive for excellence. Steve learned from his father that high-quality workmanship was a virtue to be cultivated. His father taught him to make the backs of cabinets and fences just as perfect as the front when building them, even if no one would ever see them. Steve would carry this philosophy into computer case layout, hardware specifications, and even circuit board design. Strive for excellence in everything you do. Even if no one is going to see the details, you will know they exist. 3. Collaborate. A lot of controversy surrounds how Steve would treat coworkers, particularly Steve Wozniak. This is based partially on the belief that with his lack of technical know-how, Jobs would never have gotten anywhere with Apple computers without Woz. While this is obviously true, the same could be said about where Apple got without Jobs. Steve was very, very good at finding people that made up for his weaknesses and collaborating with them in a way that leveraged his strengths: salesmanship, showmanship, and persuasion. You need to self-analyze, find your areas of weakness, and find someone who makes up for those weaknesses. And 4. Fail. Steve had massive successes, but also massive failures. His first solo project, the Lisa, was a mismanaged, bloated failure of a project. The Macintosh, Lisa's successor, did just as poorly. Next Computer was only marginally successful. He did poorly in college, was a subpar employee at Atari, and had more failure and half successes under his belt than anything else. However, by accumulating these failures and the persistence to survive them, he also grew the skills necessary to lead Apple to become the most profitable company in the world. Don't give up on things out of fear of failure. See them through eagerly and realize that each failure is one more step closer to success. That's it for today's episode. I hope our look at Steve Jobs helped you to expand your horizons and plot a course for a brighter future. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please don't forget to subscribe. Also, share this video with the one friend you think would benefit from it the most. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. As always, remember to live boldly, change the world, and continue to be awesome. Next time on Unleash the Ultramind. He was a founding father, an inventor, a philosopher, and one of the greatest minds of the early American generation. Next week on Unleash the Ultramind, Benjamin Franklin.